I want to say thank you to our sponsors. We were able to do this for free, 6 days of programming virtually with a platform for free because of 4 amazing sponsors. They were Ale House 1890 down in Lancaster. They were the Law Office of Maritza S. Nelson, LLC, Equitas Health, providing care for all, and OSHA, the Ohio High School Athletic Association. Special shout out to OSHA for showing up yesterday in support of trans youth. It was a tough day, and OSHA was one of many, many, many partners in the work who showed up in support of trans youth. Another person who showed up in support of trans youth was one of our legislators, Senator Kenny Yuko, and I am going to share a message from him now.
Hi, I'm Ohio Senate Minority Leader Kenny Yuko. I'd like to thank Equality Ohio for all the work it does to support LGBTQ Ohioans and move our state fiercely forward. Here in the legislature, Senate Democrats will always stand up to injustice and advocate for policies that fight discrimination. This includes speaking out against provisions in the next state budget that would restrict LGBTQ Ohioans access to health care and other legislation that would prevent Ohioans from living freely, including a bill that would prevent transgender children from playing sports in school. I'm committed to fighting for well-being of all workers and families in Ohio. Hate has no place here. All Ohioans deserve to feel safe, welcome, and able to reach their fullest potential. Happy Pride Month.
Thank Senator Yuko for offering a message to us and for being with us yesterday and standing up for trans youth. So here we are in our final fireside chat, and we are joined by 3 amazing Black queer elected officials who sit at the intersections of identities. And today, this final day it's called Both and it's been all about intersectionality of identities. And so that's why we're so excited to have you here having this conversation with us. I want to introduce our panelists. They are not panelists, but our conversationalists. Let's call you that, conversationalists. We have Sheena Barnes here. She is a member of Toledo Public Schools, school board member of Toledo Public Schools. Justin Gould, City Council member for University Heights, and Micah McCarey, City Council member for Athens. Thank you so much for being here. So just to set the stage and the tone for having this conversation, we got together last summer and we were in the midst of a racial uprising last summer. And that didn't stop, that didn't end. That momentum actually went through the election season. We saw the election of the first Black female Asian American Vice President, Kamala Harris. Shout out to Howard University, HU. And we saw Cori Bush, a Black Lives Matter activist, elected as the first Black woman congressperson in Missouri. I mean, that was amazing. Then we talk about intersectional identities, and you have Richie Torres and Mondaire Jones in Congress as the first openly Black and Afro-Latinx men in Congress, right? Like, talk about an intersectional, like an identity, right, in Congress. And then we've got the Georgia Senate runoff with Ossoff and Warnock and that big win that we had at the beginning of the year. And so if you looked at a lot of headlines in November or back at the time of the runoff, it was about the power of the Black vote, right? And people said, you know, this wasn't America's election, it was Black America's election. Black America decided that election, which looks like it's true across the US. And then I look at Ohio, right? There was a but. We're in a both and situation. There's a but. We look at Ohio. Does the Black vote have power in Ohio? Is there an appetite for intersectional identities to be in positions of power and elected leadership in this state? And how do we know this to be true or not true? That's a big question to start us off. Who wants to jump in?
I would say yes. I would say there is a big appetite, but a big hunger for people to take up spaces. And I think we're seeing more and more of that now, thanks to the last administration doing such a bad job that it got people pissed off, it got people fired up. And I think we're seeing a lot more younger, more intersectionalities, more people who were counted out because you didn't fit the narrative of a cisgendered white male that had money. And I think Ohio is slowly coming to terms to supporting folks. I mean, not trying to push a party, but we're having more younger leaders over the whole, Ohio parties. And I think that speaks to itself as well. So yes, I think there's a hunger, I think there's a drive, and I think anybody should be willing to run, should watch out, because we're coming. So.
That's great, Sheena, and I'd love to follow it. Micah McCarey, he, him, his, with Ohio University's LGBT Center and also Athens City Council. And I agree that there is an appetite. I felt that appetite myself, having been kind of unexpectedly appointed to our city council after being engaged in different kinds of anti-racist work and community work. And I felt like I was waiting for the door to open, and then now I'm seeing more clearly than ever that I'd like to open that door for as many other people as possible through preparation, because there are definitely access issues, even just in how dialogue unfolds, and just what kind of education and preparation we can do to really meet that appetite with preparation.
I love that idea. I think there's also an appetite for authenticity. It's come as you are Black, and come as you are queer, and come as you are rich, or come as you are poor. And the more authenticity that a person brings to a position, I think people are very excited to see that. I mean, you have politicians out there, pandering to a vote by changing the accent and dialect in which they're speaking, and it just comes off as so inauthentic. And people are over that. And so I think when we who come into this space as our authentic selves, come into the ballot box as well, or go onto the ballot, that people are excited to see that, because we show up, we interact as who we are, and it's something that we fought to be. So I think authenticity is something that people are really looking forward to as well. There's an appetite for that.
And I definitely can prove that's right, Justin, because when I was looking for someone to fix the school board system here, because I was a parent and I was pissed off, and I was looking like, you should run because you're educated, and you should run because you're just, so your words. And they was like, why don't you run? It's like, oh, because I'm Black, I'm queer, I cuss, I like my wine a little bit too much, and I will nuck if you buck, okay? And it was like, that's why you should run. And I was like, no, I'm not going to make it. It was like, no, that's why you should run. We need to see a Black mother. We need to see a queer mother. And so the things that I was trying to shelter from my safe place, they're like, no, we need that representation. And so speaking to your point, people want to see people they can see in the supermarket and have a conversation with. So, yeah.
I would say that's true. One of the, something that he couldn't join us today, City Councilmember Shannon Hardin here in Columbus, was unable to make it because of a scheduling issue. But one thing I have heard him share before is he is always being talked to at the grocery store, at the supermarket. Like everyone in Columbus, especially the older Black ladies, there is no problem walking up to Shannon in the supermarket and stopping him and letting him know what's wrong, that there's a light out at the corner, the street light ain't working, and the sign and everything. And I think that you're right, to Sheena's point. Shannon looks like their grandson, right? Shannon is someone who they can relate to, and they feel very comfortable just talking to him and letting them know what their needs are. And that's something I think we don't often have with our elected officials. So you talked about preparation. I think Micah said that. Preparation. What do you mean by that? When you expand on that preparation, being prepared to be in roles, and can you ever really be prepared for this one?
It's certainly a journey. It's a continuous learning journey, but I think even the work that Equality Ohio does represents how we can help prepare people just by providing these entry points into education and terminology and how to get engaged politically. But then I think that there's even something to be said for the kind of sort of decision-making preparation experience. How do we get people to understand that decisions sometimes take time to unfold if you're going to get proper input and really value diverse perspectives and think about potential disproportionate impacts on various populations. I think sometimes there's a political allure that can perhaps be wrapped up in power or ambition, or really truly something noble, wanting to see change, but not understanding without having had the experience how complicated that change can be, how sometimes it's passing the baton to another person, how sometimes for me, it's really about helping people find their particular set of strengths and how they can engage them in this work in ways that are going to be sustainable to them.
And if I could pull this back to an earlier conversation we had at the beginning of the summit around movement ecology, is what I hear you saying, Micah. Folks need to figure out where they fit in the movement ecology. We don't all do the same work within the movement. There are different roles for each of us to play, and you can do the work on all sides, and really figuring out where it is that you fit into that and where you want to do that work. What is it, you talked about entry points into the work, and I think politics does not feel like something that people think they can do, particularly Black people. Sheena, you said I like to cuss. I can't be a politician, right? Because there's this
perfect.
patina.
You gotta be perfect. Yeah.
You have to, or if you're not perfect, if you have a history, what do we know now in the age of the internet, right? Everyone's digging, everyone wants to pull something from your past. So what do you say to folks who are even considering of thinking about this and saying, I got a past, I don't want someone digging into my past? How do you prepare for dealing with that?
Well, for me, I'm on the school board. I ain't a city council people, so I can tell my dirt when I get in trouble. It works in my favor because I'm talking to the youth that I was, the inner Black city kid who had trauma, but didn't know how to, express it. So I'm fighting, I'm cussing, I'm getting kicked out. And so when I'm telling them like, hey, I know what juvie is, I was a teenage mother at 15, and sharing my story of, it is not this perfect person you see in this suit and barely can wear heels. This is something that someone who really went through it, who lost friends to gun violence. And so I tell the really rawness of it because I want the kids to see themselves other than what the community sees them as. Is like, you're a thug or you're, not this, not that, and empower them to take my space. I want you to take my seat, so you can help the next kids. And I think also for the adults, I challenge them to say, be careful what you and how you say and treat our kids today, because they could be elected officials tomorrow. And I literally had an experience. I was with in a Democratic Party dinner, and I was driving home from Columbus, and I called my daughter, and she's like, are you okay? I said, I'm just overwhelmed. She says, oh, what, is it bad? What happened? I said, everybody that in that room would have called the cops on me when I was younger. And that's something to really like, wow. And so I think in my position, it works for me to be air it all. I know some people can't, different positions. So when I tell someone, when somebody's like, okay, I want to run, but I have this and I have that, that gives you the strength when you deal with it to be a better elected official, because now you are humbled. You're not going in, like Micah said, for the ego or the power. You are going as, look, I don't got it all together.
I think it also goes back to that authenticity portion, right? You've said who you are from the get-go. I think people get, one of the traditions of our community is to inhabit spaces in a way that is queer, right? And so whatever it is that you are doing, whatever it is that you are leading or following or learning from or teaching, that you're doing it from the perspective of our community. And so I think where people get caught up is the idea that you have to be this suited individual with, the pressed shirt and the lapel pin, and if you don't, and you have to give the good speech and have a certain voice to you. And I happen to like my suits and lapel pins. That's who I am. I'm not like jeans and a tank top type of guy. And that's okay. That's just who I am. But if you're a jeans and a tank top type of guy, then go door to door, with jeans and a tank top on. And I'm running for city council, and this is who I am. And I think that we get into a place where I think it really gives us a good opportunity, because we've lived so long without the ability or without the expectation that we were going to please everybody. because we've been a disappointment to people that we've cared about, to people in our community, to strangers. And I think that when you come to the experience as you are, then you don't have to hide any of it. It's when you pretend to be something that you're not, then people have dirt on you. Then people can say, that's not who he is. And it's the inauthenticity that that causes people to question whether or not you're in it for the right motives and whether or not you're the person to represent them.
Delphine has raised a question here, and I'm actually going to start with your second question. I hope that that's okay if I start with your second question first, because I think it speaks directly to what Justin was just saying. And that question is, how do we challenge dynamics of respectability within queer spaces of color? And that, I think that really speaks to the of color part of the intersectional identity. I know as a Black woman, being expected to show up in spaces a certain way as a Black woman, there's a certain amount of Black respectability politics that I've always been expected to follow as a middle-class Black girl. And so while I think that there's maybe a little bit of a dichotomy there, Justin, in queer spaces, yes, show up as myself, but in Black spaces, show up respectable. And so there might be some code switching there, I could imagine. I like the question though here is, how do we challenge those dynamics of respectability within queer spaces of color? Because, you know, are they really serving us?
I think that it's, you know, about, there's work that we have to do around that. And it's something that we have to be really intentional about. And when I say that, so we have work to do and we have to have, there's intentionality and there are all these buzzwords, right? But what I mean by that is, I think this started out as a protective mechanism for our community. If I looked like that, if, you know, I had the suit on, if I had the pressed shirt, if I spoke with a little more bass in my voice, then I could be like the rest, and then I could be protected, and then I could be respected, and then the fear carries over that if you are not those things, then we are less powerful and less respected as a community. And I think for me, the work that I have to do as a Black leader is to create the space for others, right? So I love my business suit. I need people sitting at the table that really hate them and that don't like to look like that and that don't speak like me and that don't have the same background as I do. You know, we talked about intersectionality. In addition to being on city council, I'm the president of the board of directors at the LGBT Community Center of Greater Cleveland. I am so proud of the work that we've done to diversify that board and to have people with so many different backgrounds. You know, I have C-suite executives, I have attorneys, and I have, you know, drag queens. You know, I have, it is a fantastic thing, but it's work, right? So once we get there, what do we do? And how also do we create the expectation that we are stronger with those voices than we are without them? And I just think that it's incumbent upon us as leaders to kind of create that space. So.
Very well said. I appreciate, Justin, that you also you incorporated both visual appearance in terms of respectability politics, but when you hit on the speech part, that really resonated with me because I find myself not often in queer spaces of color that are entirely queer spaces of color, but in Athens, Ohio, where we have 85% white population and a very multicultural LGBT population that the university really has nurtured. I find myself sometimes hearing Black queer students speak in ways that perhaps aren't commanding as much attention as people who are speaking like they hear on board of trustees meetings or informal kind of settings. And I find it my personal responsibility there to redirect attention, to amplify messages, to call it, to even pause, to use power I can to interrupt what's going on and say, you know, I think what's happening right here is a missed opportunity to really hear an important perspective. And I think that a one-on-one conversation with a person who I was concerned might be tuning them out for what reasons I might view as being problematic, I think that can be an important part of allyship. And I honestly see a connection to the first question in there about the importance of these voices. These voices are going to help us bring an inclusion lens to any kind of decision that we're making that's going to ultimately, maybe it's adding icing to the cake. Maybe the majority just wants cake, but we can put icing and fruit and whatever else people like on it if we really listen to what people are saying and don't discount their voices because of how they sound.
So my mind goes like to the advocate fight mode when I'm thinking about this, is because in my world, how I see it is, I'm trying to decolonize stuff because it's not a right or wrong way to be present. It's just that white, hierarchy that you're not efficient enough because your voice doesn't sound like this or doesn't sound like that, or you're not in the right space. And so when I think about it, I'm thinking, the owners of the true owners of this land had, a system. They had, council. Our ancestors had council, but because it's not a European standard, now as we move into it, you got to talk a little bit like this, and oh, thank you so much, and I'm articulate, and use those things to assimilate. And I think Justin mentioned that it almost seemed like whiteness, really, let's call it out what it is. Because you're not assimilating a Hispanic or Latina, you're not assimilating, a queer person. You're assimilating whiteness, and at that, a white cisgender male is what we're trying to assimilate to, so we could feel included, feel like I can do this job. So when I walk in with my sneakers and my Tupac shirt, I still command respect, just as I would walk in with a suit and tie on, or a suit and dress. And once again, I think I'm in a unique position because you hear me talking like this, but when I go to my kids, I'm like, hey, what up, dog? You cool? You all right? Because I will pull up on you. And they need to see that, because if we all try to fit the narrative, and I would say, I know it's complicated. And I know some city council members, I know it's complicated because you have to get into that space to create more space. And I do understand that. I am learning that I can't just be like, oh no, y'all gonna let me up in here. But to me, it's like this, we created this space. Indigenous folks, Afro, Latinos, Afro, we created this space. Y'all just had to get the game plan together. But this is ours. And not saying our white counterparts are not good officials, but I'm saying we have to stop asking for a seat at the table. That's over with. That's done with. We already see that we could take it. That's done. Queer, person of color, non-able-bodied, youth. It's over. We're taking over. So that's just me, my advocate. So
I love that. Voice, sound, right, has always been something that I've worked through and struggled with. I use voice professionally as a city council person. I use voice professionally as an attorney. And I think that, when I hear, one of the things you said was we are assimilating whiteness. And it has taken me a long journey to recognize that this voice, the voice that I'm using right now, is a Black voice. This is the voice of a queer Black man. This is what queerness sounds like too. And also, I've had conversations with people when, I don't show up in a Tupac shirt, right? I don't wear my sneakers, and I can be an activist too. And so all of those things, it's creating space for all of us, and the entire breadth of that experience, of that queer experience at that table. And so I think, as much as I've worked on that for myself, it's just like, yeah, it's okay. I can speak exactly as I am. I can code switch too, but I can speak exactly as I am right now and own my Blackness, own my queerness, without having to identify the way that I sound as white,
I just want to also say that, Justin, because you're right. And when I say assimilate to whiteness, it's not you can't talk Black, you can't talk white. What I am saying, though, is we have a hierarchy. We have to, and that's one thing we're hoping we're getting better at it, is actually looking at this. We do have a hierarchy of standards. And I'm pretty sure, Justin, you know that just because you do sound like a Black queer man that you are proud of, it's still more comforting to different circles than someone who doesn't sound like that. And
Sure.
that's just being honest. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And there's no offense to you or anyone else that, you know, has a different vernacular or, you know, a different tone, is that we just know that, you know, we know that's what it is. Like, you will be invited to the cookout probably before me. So I'm just saying.
But yeah, so those dynamics are real. And I think that there's something being said here about making space for others, recognizing, you know what, I'm going to get in here. That's something I had to recognize for myself. I have a JD behind my name. And folks are just going to react differently because of that JD behind my name. It doesn't actually mean that I'm more qualified to sit in certain seats than other people. And I know that that other person who might be more qualified isn't going to get the consideration because they lack those letters. So if I do get the consideration, if I do take that space, part of my responsibility is to make sure that the next seat, you don't have to have a JD in order to be considered for that next seat, right? It's you get through, if you're narrow enough to fit through that narrow door, don't just fit through it, open it up a little bit, elbow it, open that up a little bit wider so more folks can get through that door the next time. So let's talk about, I want to dig deeper into Ohio, right? Let's talk about the realities of what it means to be a Black elected official in Ohio. Are there enough Black elected officials in Ohio? I'm going to say no. And I really want more, particularly at the state level, at all levels, honestly. And how can we build that bench? How can we get more folks running, and how can we make sure that they are supported when they do run? Because let's be real, running for office isn't easy. And then when you do it as a Black person or with an intersectional identity, it's that much harder. But we need folks to do that hard work. So how do we, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? How do we get this done?
I'll go. No, okay. I'm a talker, so I gotta talk, because I will talk y'all to death. I think supporting, and again, it goes back to that, you know, who's in, who's out type of thing. We're talking about that. I can't think of the word, but who is the cool Black person or the cool queer person or the queer, you know, cool intersectional person that we want to support, because one person can get all the support and love and shout outs, but this person can't because they really don't come to hang out with us. So we really don't know if they're for us. And I think it's just literally showing up and volunteering. I think people in our spaces don't, like, I think you mentioned it actually, like, don't know what to do or how to do in these spaces. Even when they're about to run, start volunteering. And I think helping on campaigns is very helpful, because I'm just saying, you know, more than likely, you're not going to get the same volunteership from the parties, especially if you're in a rural area. I'm just saying, from what I have experienced, I could be wrong, or, you know, what my friends have experienced. And you won't get as much funding in those spaces either. One, because of your race, and then you add another sectionality on it, is like, so just having support, like backbone support, like, yes, I will knock doors for you because I'm safe in this space to knock doors, because I know I can't go to certain areas, even in Toledo, which is a city. So I had to send people that look like that area to get more response. So I think just showing up and volunteering is a big one to help our candidates.
Very well said. I'm gonna try and follow that, although it's kind of difficult. Being in Southeast Ohio, it's my understanding that it's been decades since we've had a person of color on our city council, and it's not something that people even really look to Southeast Ohio expecting to see. And I mentioned being 85% white, but then there's just something that even I had to face as a barrier deciding to come here for my undergrad, in terms of, is it safe for me to do the kind of work or live the kind of life that I want to in this environment? And I have seen a lot of progress over the 18 years that I've been here, but would love to see more. And now, since I realize I never expected to see myself on Athens City Council when I came here all those years ago, I realized that I would have loved and preferred to have been entering a city and environment where there was a queer person of color on the city council, or where there had been more people of color even in upper level leadership positions. Now I see myself wanting to use what opportunities I can to encourage or appoint people to serve on different commissions and committees, to be involved in, as I mentioned before, aligning not just strengths, but also their values. And even when I think about the comprehensive plan that our city has for what we want to see, where we want to see ourselves in 2040, there are pieces of that that are about the arts. There are pieces of that that are about policy, and there are pieces about community building. And I think if we can help people find their kind of entry point in, once again, and really encourage them and nurture them, that combined with visibility to let them know that it's possible, that their efforts could result in the leadership opportunities that they're interested in or seeking, that would be what I would have to add.
I think that there's a mechanism, a political mechanism, a political machine by which Black people have historically been elected that is very grassroots, very faith-based, and also not necessarily, and sometimes shrouded, right, from what you would anticipate would be a mainstream way of election. And so there are, groups of Black men and Black women who caucus together, who select a candidate, who support that candidate, who introduce them to the pastor, who then allows them to speak to the congregation, and now you have a community's support. And I didn't get invited to any pastors and introduced to any pastors, and it can be very difficult when the mechanism for electing Blackness is also shrouded in a historically oppressive, organization, right? And I think, I sat with Equality Ohio as Maple Heights rejected the Pride Month commemoration this month, and I wasn't there this final meeting, but to sit and listen to my elders talk about, well, I don't think the community needs that. Well, we may have had Red Dress Month and Prostate Awareness Month, but we need to do surveys when it comes to queer issues, and I don't think that I need, my community wants finally was I don't think my community wants this. We need to talk about these other issues that are really the concern of Black people in this community. And that was heartbreaking, right? Like I saw someone say that, and I think I saw Phyllis say heartbreaking, and it was. These are my elders. These are the people that I respect, that I care about, that I love, that do lead me. And that is, I think, something that we have to figure out, how as a community we can create our own mechanisms of support, of funding, and of advancement. So conversations like this are really helpful, because if you don't have that flyer to hand out, if you don't have that door hanger to put on, if you don't have the support of people that look like another community or even don't, but are still willing to show up to that door to say, I know Siobhan and she's fantastic and you need to elect her, then you're not going to get elected. And it's hard to get that sea of support.
Thank you so much for just making clear what I think so many of us know, but that method of election that happens in Black communities, and how that works and how that actually doesn't work for queer folks. That is a very good point. I just wanted to take just pause for a moment, say thank you everyone for being here. We're at our fireside chat. I do want to give a shout out to the fire that did show up. Shout out to the fire. We did not have our fireside chat or our fire originally for this last one, but the fire has shown up. So we are indeed fireside this evening. And this is a conversation. We've got three amazing Black elected officials here who are leading our conversation, but this is a conversation. So please feel free to jump in with your questions, your comments, and what you would like to hear from these amazing folks.
I have a comment. So our fireside chats are meant to kind of round out the day, right? So let's talk about what we've learned throughout the day. And so I was obviously at the panel discussion this morning or 1 o'clock. That is not the morning. But so Sheena, you said something about space, and basically it resonated with me because back, like, I'm saying it like I'm so much older. I was gonna say back when I was an undergrad, literally 2 years ago. So when I was in that space and trying to build capacity for students and trying to, get students, especially students of color and queer students, LGBTQ students, to feel comfortable, I definitely would try to emphasize, this is your space. You literally pay to go here. You pay to keep the lights on. You pay for the water to run. You pay for the AC in these buildings. You pay for literally everything. This is literally your physical space. And so it's just heartbreaking for when students of color, Black students, LGBTQ students, students who are differently abled, when they don't have a sense of space in their own spaces. Like, I feel like I'm saying space a lot, but it's true. It's like they don't have an area to call their own because they don't feel comfortable enough because of what culture and what standards permeate, for this setting, a collegiate setting, right? Especially at a predominantly white institution. And so whenever I was on panels or I was talking to, predominantly students of color, like, this is your space. You might not feel as if you can walk into the religious life center because of whatever reason, but you pay to go here. That is just as much your space as the next student. You feel you can't go into whatever, like, lounge. You're just as welcome in that space as the next white student, even if you're not white, And so I just thought, like, I wanted to bring up the topic of spaces and how having elected officials represent the demographics that they're a part of is super important, because it helps create physical spaces and it helps create, somewhere to go. Like, that's why when I was a big proponent of creating a bigger diversity and inclusion center at my university. Not because I'm like, oh, you just stuck all the Black and brown kids into a corner, and now it looks like we're like in a fishbowl, and they can look into a room and we literally look like it's like a zoo with people passing by, and you see all the Black and brown kids hanging out in this room, and then all these white people are going on their tours and like, oh my God, look at all this diversity. Like, not for just that, but if you mark yourself as an institution that has a cornerstone or a foundation in true diversity, inclusion, and equity, and not just using those buzzwords, you would make a physical space that is larger, so that you show that it has a permanent space with not only within your physical foundation, but within your systemic foundation, within your morals, your values and stuff. And so I think space is important. And so I think it's important that we have elected officials that represent their demographics. Like, here in Cleveland, we are a predominantly Black city. Why are there not more Black elected officials here in Cleveland? Our West Side is predominantly Puerto Rican. Why is Jasmine Santana the first congresswoman in Cleveland to be the first Latina woman on council, excuse me? Why is she the first, right? Like, we need elected officials to represent their people, because your physical presence taking up a seat creates more space for the rest of us. And that's super important. And so I just wanted to tie that in from what you said earlier in the day and bring it to our conversation.
I just want to say thank you. Like, you are future hands down. Whenever you want to run, I got your back. But thank you for bringing that up, because that's something I actually had to unlearn, is because I would get frustrated. So I'm the executive director of Equality Toledo. They're a plug. So Micah and Justin dropped it. I was like, oh, let me drop mine. And I used to find myself getting frustrated when I'm like, okay, I can't be the voice for every intersectionality in the LGBTQ plus space. That's not me. I can't do that, because I would be mad if somebody does it for me. And I would plan things for this group or whatever, and they wouldn't show up. I'm like, but this is yours. Well, you can go ahead and speak on it, but this is not mine. And I would get frustrated because I'm like, you talk about not having space or not being heard. Here's a platform, you take it, you do whatever you want, but then you don't show up. What is going on? Something like what you were saying, Samantha. And I had to understand that this is generational trauma and isolation and a mindset that I can't take up a space because I can't. And that doesn't matter where you come from. That was the thing. I can't take up a space. And even as a child, I don't know, well, I'm gonna say Black households. I'm not for sure everybody, but most households that I know that Black folks grew up in you are to be seen, not heard. And so even then we're taught at a young age that this space doesn't belong to you. So until you have somebody saying, okay, it's safe continuously, so you get comfortable, I think we're going to see a lot of that. And yes, it does, because when Micah said he was in Athens, I was like, what? Okay. All right, brother. Okay, you strong, because I couldn't do that. But once again, now I'm like, okay, if I have somebody that's in Athens that needs to see him, I know I got somewhere to, hey, Micah's an awesome person, you to go see. That's what we're doing slowly, but it's going to take a lot of the people in spaces like you, Sam, to say, hey, we got to work on this, we got to change this. But also it's a responsibility for the leaders in our community too, to be like, it's okay, take your time, Yeah.
I see, when you talk about kind of building off of what Samantha said and Delphine in the comments, I see my executive director Phyllis on the call, around the fire as we are. One of the things that I have learned from her is the power that you get by surrounding yourself with others and getting their input about how that space should be built. So Delphine said in the comments, this is because those spaces are dictated to them without their input. So I'll give you an example. People think you get to elected office and then you are in charge of the, as example, most recently, the Juneteenth celebration, right? And I could totally see us creating this Juneteenth celebration next year, and it's dictated, right? It's not part of this. It's not part of the community. And so what we've done in University Heights is to create a committee to invite the community. This is your space. This is your holiday. What is the tradition that you want to create around this? What is the event that you want to create around this? What space do you want to inhabit with this? Is it a public park? Is it someplace more private? What is it that you would like to do with it? And by that, you create a process to create a space with the input of the people who will inhabit it and will use it and will benefit from it and will be celebrated by it. And I think that that's one of the most important things that we as leaders can do, is to make sure that those voices are heard and that input is had. Samantha's point, you gave us a space, but you didn't ask us if it felt comfortable. We're viewed here, but we're not seen. And by that, if you come and you speak to me and you get my input on that, I bet you that space for Black students looked a lot different if you were to get their input and actually act on it. So I think that's the call for Black leadership, and a way that we can make sure that the spaces that need to be created are created and used by those who will inhabit them.
I really appreciate how clearly you put that, Justin, as someone who works for an organization that tries to create spaces. I hear that, Sheena. We've been there with you, where you want to create space, you want the community to come and take up the space, and then hearing you very clearly, Justin, of allow the community that's going to take up the space to design the space, right? Like nothing that is about us without us is for us, right? And so there has to be involvement in the creation of the space if the space is actually going to fit the people it's created for. Thank you for just putting that so beautifully. Yes. And Phyllis asked a question. Hello, hi Seven. Asked a question down in chat and said, how can we support you in these roles as elected officials, as folks who are doing this work of widening doors and co-creating spaces with the community. And Micah shared a little bit in the chat, but I also want to invite folks' voice into the room about ways that we heard from Sheena about volunteering and knocking doors. That is so important. I'm going to say donating. I'm a fundraiser. I'm going to say donate because the dollars are where it's at. It costs money. You got to pay people to do these campaigns. You got to pay for printing. Are there hidden things that we're not seeing that we could be doing? Like, what's the thing that somebody has done for you and you were like, oh my gosh, that was so helpful?
I think holding us accountable. That's something for me, because other elected officials, we get them in, woo, November, January, yay. And then they can keep what they said on the campaign trail, or they can shift. And when I say that, I know some things doesn't go, okay, I'm going to paint rainbows everywhere. And like, no, you can't do that. No, like just really hold them accountable. Like, are you staying true to what you can do? I think is a big one. And my support, once again, may look different because, I am in the fights with the CRT, conversation. I am in the fights with the trans youth ban. And the one thing I find the saddest is, and I said it actually at my board meeting, I get in trouble a lot at my board meetings. But I said that the easiest group to attack, to be honest, is the youth. Their funding's always cut. If you look at all these bills, they're aimed toward them in some kind of way. And so I need support, not just when I'm running, but afterwards too. I think we kind of forget that. This is how we get things passed in our favor. If we're showing up in the chambers or the boardrooms and staring their opponents down, like, you gonna pass it because this is what we need. It's scary sometimes, but it's what we need. We need you to hold us accountable, but also support us through our entire term as well.
I think the next step is also helpful to shine light on where we need to go next, right? So I find the place that I struggle with most is how can I be of use next? So, I knew that when I came in, the first thing I was going to do in my first year in office was to have an LGBT inclusive workplace protections, and we did that. And now what? Like, what does my community need? And I'm not at the State House, and I don't feel like I'm useful, in that. I don't know if I can be. Maybe I can, maybe I can't. But like, I don't know what that next step is. And my community in University Heights, is limited to University Heights. So I think part of that accountability holding is need sharing. This is what I need from you. You're elected. You have this platform. You have, we heard from you here. The next thing I need from you is this. And I think we're all open to hearing that and to do that work.
Gwen looked like she was going to say something. I was going to ask Justin if I can share my needs in the grocery store. First of all, I just want to be clear. You said need sharing. I'm just making sure it can happen in the grocery aisle.
Grocery store, bus stop, library. Okay. Just come on up.
Look, I'm open to all that except Target. When I'm in Target, that's my
Me
zen.
time.
I just need that moment. Like, look, in the parking lot, that's fine. But in Target, give me my zen. I just that's what I'm saying.
While I'm eating, no. Target, no. While I'm eating, no. Those are the two places. Okay. So that now we have our boundaries set, right?
All right, if you're ready, I'll go forth. So Justin, I so appreciate what you're saying about like how do you figure out what that next thing is? And as a person who has attended way more city council meetings in the past 5 years than ever in my life, and then probably like a lot of people do in their whole lives, like we have a civic engagement and a democracy problem, and people don't know what their city council members can do for them. They don't know what their school board members can do for them, right? And so I'm wondering where you all are seeing those gaps and what that learning curve was like for you, and how you got, I mean, even the procedural things, right? Like, oh, 3 readings versus this many, or like how does something actually get passed? And I see all the time these incredible activists who are like, the pictures that we've seen of like how to advocate is storming the city hall, right? Is showing up in those ways. And so how do we also, without playing into respectability politics too much as is necessary, like whatever that looks like, whatever that balance is, while also educating people about like what is your power, what are the things you can do. That may be a little bit of a chaotic question, but I hope that reads like, how do we do some of that civic engagement to actually make democracy work? That's what I'm interested in.
So I love this. I love this idea, because I'm like a speech and debate geek, right? Like, I'm 6'8" and was like 400 pounds in high school, and people were like, you must play X, Y, or Z, you play football, right? No, I'm in French club and I do impromptu speech and debate. And so I'm such a geek about this, right? And do you know that you can circulate a petition and recall any person that's elected to office? Most jurisdictions have a recall process. So if you have a problematic person on your city council, you can go get a petition. And sometimes in smaller communities like University Heights, it's not that many people. And that person goes back on the ballot to get recalled from office. You can remove them from their position. So I think one of the things that I think we can do better at is to broadcast. Also, sometimes we don't have to run, right? I know a good activist who I'm not going to call out by name, who got into a political position and said, I hate it here. I hate this. I don't like the procedure. I don't like the wrangling. I don't like the politics, but this person is one of the most effective advocates I know. So what can you do to give the power to our advocates who show up to these meetings, who hold up signs, who walk in the streets and march, to then also give them a clipboard and say, now, while you're doing those things, get that person on the ballot to lose their job. And I think as elected officials, to broadcast the little things, the procedural mechanisms. This isn't, if you try to do this on emergency, you're going to need 2 votes and you're not going to have the support to get the super majority that you need to pass on emergency. But if you can be patient and have 2 readings of this, I know 4 people who will vote for this, and you can get it passed in 2 readings. Whereas if you put it on emergency, it's going to fail, because you'll never be able to overcome the supermajority necessary to overcome the procedural hurdle. So when you find these little things, you share them, and I think that it makes the roles that others play more effective.
Ooh, can I just, because I want to bring it back the same way that Samantha did, back to day 1 in movement ecology, because I'm thinking, Justin, you with that knowledge of the procedure and the rules and these mechanisms and that's in one lane, right? But you're not siloed. If we're not siloed and we're in communication with folks in other parts of the movement who are in a different lane, who are going to be circulating the petition, right? So not only are they're doing the work that fits the work that they want to do, right? That is their movement work, is to be out in the streets circulating a petition. Justin knows what that petition has to have on it. All the I's are dotted, all the mechanism, like that we filed it in triplicate, right? And then that is the movement ecology, because that is all these different pieces coming together to get the thing done. Everybody played their role. I love it.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, you talk to people. I mean, I think in University Heights this year, this cycle, mayor is like 62 signatures. Like, you can be on the ballot in the city to be the 62, mayor.
That's all you need?
62.
I had to get 500 for school board.
Right. And I think people don't realize that in these smaller municipalities, it's the amount of people who voted the last election, a percentage of the people who voted in that city. So you live in some of these smaller areas, and it's a much smaller, I mean, 500, my goodness, that was a task.
I need more than the judges, okay?
Right?
And I get paid the least.
Yeah, and I think for Cleveland mayor, you need, I don't even know how many you need in Cleveland mayor, but they be out here petitioning sun up to sundown. That's how many you need, like every day. Like, but Cleveland is a pretty big city, so.
Yeah. I think I had to get the most signatures for the position. Over the mayor, over the judges, I'm just saying, kind of a little still bitter about that, but.
But I wonder, when you talk about that, Gwen, I saw Gwen kind of put the statistic right out there. Is this another way that Equality Ohio could help? Like, RuPaul's You Better Work, it's like, you better run. Like, here's what you need to do in your municipality to get on the ballot. You need to go to your board of elections, you need to get your signature, and I can give it for University Heights, we can look at what it is for South Euclid, just so people in these communities know what they need to do to get on the ballot and to run. Because it's one thing, talk about what you need to do to run and the support you need in the mechanism. People don't ever get past the procedure. And so I wonder, maybe we can create this type of resource where it's like, we want you to run, we want to support you, and here's what you need to get on the ballot where you are.
I think that was, I don't have anything to add there. I think if you want to go, Sheena, please do.
I mean, to Justin's point too, is like, this is something I know first of all, I wanted an all Black queer campaign. I wanted to support, if you wasn't a woman, LGBTQ, a person of color, non-able-bodied affiliation, you wasn't on my campaign or anything. Only thing we did was the shirts we had to print because of the major company here was union. But in that, we found out we didn't know the basics at all. We wasn't told those basics, because in Toledo, the elders want to hold their spots. So here come a young whippersnapper. They're not going to share, this is how the game is to be told. And, they say the game is to be told, not to be sold. And that's what it is. And so they don't tell us, okay, you need to make sure you have these many signatures. You need to make sure you have this much money starting off. You have to have a fundraiser right away. That really hindered us. And I think it hinders a lot of, newcomers, because they don't know, all the important campaign meetings to be at, the parades you have to be in, and how to actually schedule your stuff. And when you're talking about, you need a campaign manager, a treasurer, a scheduler, a PR person. And let's be honest, if you doing this for the first time, that's your friends and your family. And you better hope they come with it. and understanding like, okay, what does this mean when I go and get this endorsement? Do that mean they're going to give me money? Are they not going to give me money? Do they want me to say something? So it's a lot of different things that I think now the new elected officials have an opportunity to do, is share that. And I say like what Justin was saying about, I know what needs to get put in front of us. I know how it needs to be passed. So now I'm your accomplice. Now I have the inside, you pull it to me, and we're working together to dismantle all this. And so I got kind of happy when Justin was like, yeah, that's how you do it, on the inside, tear it up. But it's also, once again, being, authentic about your mistakes in the campaign. I should have raised more money, because I know as a Black queer woman, I wasn't going to get those dollars like everybody else from the unions, being for real. But also to share your drive. I've heard people say, well, so what would you say to people who want to run? They go, don't run. It's horrible. You'll be tired. You'll be miserable. People will discriminate against you. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Tell them like, don't run on things that I did wrong. You may have a better experience. And so all tie that into each other. I think is more up to just sharing the information on the position. It's still funny. I am like the most unknown politician here in Toledo, because nobody knows what the hell a school board member does. So I'm okay with that, because I can go to Target and not be, bothered. But also people don't understand they can vote for me without having kids in the school. So there's a lot of education there, a lot of education about what the city council can do, what school board can do, what the mayor can do. But we're not having those conversations in our community like we need to be, you know, even in queer spaces. We have a Stonewall Dems here, and we're trying to educate why taking the census was important, why voting is important. And not just because we want you to have a queer person in that space, but because you want somebody who cares about you in your space. So education is a big thing we need to hone in on more.
I think heard. I think what you said was music to Gwen's ears, because as you heard, civic engagement, queer civic engagement is something that is near and dear to Gwen's heart. She wants all of us to be much better at understanding our leadership and our elected officials. So stay tuned. This is something that Equality Ohio also thinks very deeply about, and because this is something we have to remind folks of. You know, we deal in a lot of different areas. There's Supreme Court cases. There's stuff happening at the state house. There's stuff going on at the local level, and it gets really confusing, especially in a state like Ohio, where the laws don't line up. And quite frankly, the laws are even more out of whack today than they were last year because of the Bostock decision, because of that Supreme Court decision, and things that are happening. And it is overwhelming to track. It's overwhelming for us to track. Let's just, if we can say that here at Equality Ohio, Emily's one of our attorneys on staff, and she's nodding. So if it's overwhelming for us to track, just imagine what it is when this isn't your job, right? When this isn't something that you're, and it's not necessarily sexy unless you're Justin. This isn't something that we're really into or that we can really nerd out about. So I think that we need to find ways to make it matter, to make it sexy for people, to get people in the room and get them to want this information, because it really does impact their lives in meaningful ways. And we could have so much power if with that knowledge comes greater power and greater ability to use that power and wield that power in ways that support our communities, the ways that support the most marginalized in our communities. And not always relying on others to do that work for us. Go ahead, Micah.
Oh, no, I am just really wanted to affirm what you're saying and thank Equality Ohio for already taking the measures to bring these kinds of conversations together and to inspire people to find their access points into all this work.
Yeah, it's about access points, definitely. We've got a comment from Delphine, and it's a term that's actually come up before in Stakeholder Summit. We've talked about it over a couple of days now, and it's trauma-informed politics. We are in the process of becoming a more trauma-informed organization at Equality Ohio, recognizing that the LGBTQ community, the community that we are part of and that we serve, is traumatized, right? That we are members of that community and are traumatized. And then thinking as Black queer elected officials, you come from traumatized communities. How do you practice trauma-informed politics in this society, in this culture, which is so not trauma-informed in so many ways?
Thank you for that question. That's actually one of the reasons I ran. Because I saw, and I'm a trauma-informed care specialist, and I saw that our kids were being traumatized or having trauma for gun violence. And we know if you have or experiencing trauma or PTSD, you don't retain information the same. And so when they're saying our kids are bad, they're failing, the grades are low, we don't take that in consideration. And I said, well, why are we not having this conversation? And so I went in with the lens of, we are looking at patients. How can we help them heal to obtain education? And so when I'm talking about the things, my resolutions, or when I'm asking about our engagement process, it's always coming from how do this help them heal while gaining education? So I think that's a big passion for me. Because I saw my own son go through. We experienced a gun violence incident, and I'm so numb to it, me and my daughter, because we're from Flint, Michigan. This is something like, oh, that's just gunshots. Okay, we're good. Well, he never experienced that because he's been here his whole life, so it was kind of quiet. And I saw him go from a 3.2 to all Fs. And I thought he was, just acting out. Then he said, Mom, I'm not going outside anymore. I don't want to die. And I'm like, oh my God, he's traumatized. How can I miss it? And I started to think, okay, he has a parent that is aware, that has the tools, that talks about therapy and mental health in the household. What about that child who doesn't? How are they working through this in this process at school? And so for me, I can say everything that I push out in the back of my head is, how would I do a care plan for this person or this group? And so when you look at the resolutions, it may just say Black Lives Matter, George Floyd, but it's also putting in little writings, mental health counselors of color. So to make sure that somehow it's attached to, okay, we're talking about George Floyd, we're talking about Black Lives Matter and the trauma that we experience. How can we make sure that we have counselors that look like our kids so they can have this conversation beyond school hours or in school hours? So that's how I kind of work with my policies.
I think, so I'll give a couple examples of the way that being aware of the trauma of the communities that you serve has played out for me, right? And so one of those is the Jewish community in University Heights. And we have this group of people who have come to our city from various places in the country and around the world. And we have a very large Orthodox Jewish community. And, we have these zoning codes and ways that you can use your property. And people who want to practice a certain sect or a certain subdivision of Judaism, and they just will create a place of worship in their home. And people will come and they will worship in that way. And when the government comes in and tells you that you cannot do that, you cannot have a place of worship just in your home, you have to go through this place and get approval, the reaction can be quite strong. For me, I think that it is a place to show compassion, show understanding, or try to get understanding from that community. How did it feel when we showed up and said that you couldn't do that? How can I help you through this process? Another is, in our area we have an area of our city that's predominantly Black. And there have been some recent acts of violence in that area. And to recognize, as Sheena just highlighted, that is a source of trauma in our community. And many people come to a community. I've moved to the suburbs. I've moved to University Heights. I'm not in the middle of it anymore. I'm so sorry it's happening, but I've gotten away. And so when that visits you in the place you escaped to, it can be a traumatic experience. And so I was so grateful when our vice mayor came in, had a meeting with the detectives, let people know what was going on. And just that, I think awareness of what was going on, that it's affecting this community in a very specific way, helped inform the reaction, and also helped short circuit a different response, which felt a lot more flippant, a lot more short, and a lot more uninformed about what that community needed. So I just, those are just some examples that came to mind as we were having the discussion.
I'll add one more. I am thinking of the challenge at times of getting community members, LGBTQ in particular, to engage with law enforcement with all the change and improvement that we want to see because of that past traumatic experience and aversion to even being sometimes in the same physical space, even if it's in a different context. And I think leaning into partnerships that have enduring courage. It's not always going to be the first time you get people in the same room that there's amazing conversation and openness and dialogue. But I found, even in working with local law enforcement and bringing queer people of color together with them for difficult, challenging conversations that at first didn't feel like they were necessarily going to be productive. But then the second time we went in, we were able to pull from the gems of good things that had happened. And I find that now, when I just honestly have these conversations, allow for the vulnerable space, the processing of here's why I'm reluctant, and here's what my hopes are, and here's how I kind of negotiate that. And I find that if I listen to what they're sharing, like perhaps an online interaction would be comfortable first, it's not in the same room, or really what I'm hearing is if I see law enforcement officers just demonstrating on their own accord effort to be in LGBT center programs, and in particular when they can do so without coming with that visible authority, that they would be more willing to take that next step the next time and be at the table, or join a police advisory committee, or attend some of those public meetings to share their concerns and give their input. So it's a process, and I think it really benefits from courageous partnerships.
And I just want to take a moment to say, like, even with us three, and I know I'm in a different seed, but we all have different traumas that we have to focus in on. Just us three. Could you imagine across Ohio how, like, well, yes, that's a thing, but this is more predominant right now that we have to actually address. And I think that's a uniqueness, but also the challenges. Because I can be like, oh, well, this worked here, Justin. You'd be like, well, that's not what we're dealing with right now. Thank you, because it does come up, but that's not the hot topic. Oh, Micah, this didn't work. Well, it worked here because that's what we're dealing with. So I think that's the uniqueness too of when you're talking about informed trauma, because trauma comes in all kinds of ways that it's difficult to say this policy, wipes out, over all of it, because it's different seasonings to it, I guess you can say.
And I think you were talking about the traumas that we each kind of highlighted from our experiences. And I liked, if you listen to what we've said throughout this, personal trauma too, right? How do I as a leader react to certain things? And it's something that I brought up at the last time we had this forum, was my own reaction to the religious community when I was trying to pass the LGBT inclusive non-discrimination ordinance, right? And my trauma as a former Mormon, Black queer person was that religion would be against my liberty. And therefore I had to be prepared for the fight. And I went in there with a much more hard position and found softness and love and compassion and welcome. And yes, I understand what it's like to be persecuted too. I felt that in my life, in my way, said very religious, Orthodox Jewish people. And at the end of the day, the Jewish community and its leaders on council, and the Catholic community and its leaders on council, and the Black community and their leaders on council, including me, passed this with unanimously. And it's just an example of how we too have to be aware of our own trauma, not just the trauma in our communities, because it can affect the way that you interact with people.
Prime example of that, Justin, when Micah was talking about the police, I'm like, defund the police, so like right now we even have a push for, someone's trying to push to have double the police presence in our schools. And I'm like, you will want to spend money on police versus counselors and social workers. But also I know I don't feel safe around the police. So, so like you said, Justin, we have to check our own trauma, because now I got to sit in there with the police, chief of police, and go, this is not working for me. But also as a director of Equality Toledo, say, this is what we need from you as a community. So it's a very challenging thing to actually address your own trauma and be informed on how to navigate that while in these roles. I think it's something I'm learning, because even the mentioning of having a gathering with police to talk about the differences, and I have families and friends who are officers, but at the same time, it's still like my ears perk up to like, nah, that's not going to work for me. I do not want to be in the room, because, then I think my trauma definitely made my decision not to get endorsed by the police union. I'm like, you may sit there and write me a check and hug me now, but you're going to pull me over when I leave. So I don't want your money. and I'm planning on defunding you. So it's okay. We're going to make it all work. So yeah. So just to put that out that you were right about that.
I love this. It's been an amazing conversation. Again, I just want to recognize we're at about 10 minutes left in our time together. And it's been an amazing conversation. We'll probably get one more question here from Delphine. And I want to say thank you. I'm going to say thank you again, but this has been amazing, this conversation this evening. Go ahead, Delphine.
It's comment / not question. I think when it comes to trauma-informed practice and regardless of the arena that we're trying to embody that there is a difference between playing nice, because we have often been told that as minoritized folks, we have to play nice in order to make those in power feel comfortable. With safe space, brave space doesn't always mean that it's going to be comfortable. And I've had conversations with our police chiefs here, both university and city, and I know I made them uncomfortable, and I'm okay with making them uncomfortable because we need to challenge them to grow, and we need to invite them to consider the realness. And oftentimes the response that I would receive is, oh, but I'm a nice guy, I'm a nice person. Okay, yes, you are. However, your officers are profiling people of color here in Athens. Your officers are mistreating queer folk here in Athens. We need to talk about this. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to find a way to live through it. And I'm not going to play nice just because that's more effective. And I am mindful that is a tactic and technique that is needed and is used. And I'm not trying to poo-poo that in any way. But I guess myself, and maybe I'm just jaded and tired, I'm tired of, oh, you have to play nice, because playing nice isn't working anymore. That was my comment / question / rant.
So I am with you. And because I am that person, like when I cut my mic on, they know, oh, Sister Soldier about to go off again. So I had to learn to get an accomplice that can have that soft conversation, because that's not me. Because I'm that Black mama, what you not gonna do? And I started knowing that I can get my message across just like this, but if my emotions are tied to it, like police brutality, like saying our kids are criminalized because my babies are in that school, you don't want me to cut that mic on. We were talking about CRT this month. I'm passing a resolution because in Toledo, our Pride Month is in August. So I'm passing a resolution to talk about the trans band youth. And I dare somebody to say something about it because I'm going to call you out on it. However, I have a partner, a colleague who's like, and this is why we need to have this, and that works for us. And we need that. So definitely, if you like me, get that accomplice that can smooth it over a little bit. Because the two of y'all going to be just, dope.
I'm that colleague, right? I'm the colleague. And this is part of the ecology conversation we've been having. And this is also the part of the how can I help you? Because part of what we talked about in the last session was that I have to stay effective. And if I am sidelined and if I cannot pass anything, then I become an ineffective leader. And that is difficult for my community. So, and I haven't had to utilize this in my current position, but I know the Sheena in Cleveland. If I need, I'm sure I could probably now call you Sheena. I could just call the real Sheena. Sheena's going to show up to University Heights. But knowing the people that you can call and then having the community show up. We didn't need a fight, but when Gio showed up from Equality Ohio at the meeting when we were talking about, the ordinance, it felt supportive. And if I needed a Delphine or a Sheena to show up and cause good trouble, I would be ready then to swoop in next. And there were a lot of really great points that I just heard in Sheena, and we all did because the microphone was very loud, and then we can get to a place where, and that's why I've introduced this ordinance. And if you don't pass it, this community will continue to show up here and you will not hear the end of it. And I think that that's so important because you have both everyone playing their role for the collective good.
Yes, finessing the arts. That's what I call it. And it's like, it's funny because now it's on Facebook. I'm a social media person, and how it's like when you're trying to unlearn the angry email, and it's like, so saying, oh, you didn't mess me up. It's like, per our last conversation, this is what, and it's like, that's kind of like how it is in the rooms, in the chambers, and I can say, you got me messed up, or I can say, I'm sorry, I didn't understand. How do you feel that I said that? And so I'm learning. I'm gonna get there.
I think of Obama and then angry Obama. Does everyone remember that from Key and Peele, where it was Obama and then angry Obama? But we actually need both of them in the room. So we need Obama, and then when people get out of pocket, we get angry Obama, right? And it's the buddies, it's the yin and yang, the buddy system, as Gwen said. I love it, which means there has to be more than one person on council, right? We can't have a buddy system if there's only one person on the school board, only one person on the council, only one person in the legislature. We've got to have multiple intersectional identities, multiple marginalized identities represented in these places of power and in these positions of leadership, so that you can then support each other, right? You can have each other's back. It can be the yin and the yang. Absolutely. Sheena, well, now you're just angry Obama from now on. That's all I'm going to call you. It's angry Obama.
Well, here's the funny part. People don't think that because of how I am today. Like, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh wait, just wait. Wait till you get that mic on.
It's always the nice ones. It's always the nice ones. Absolutely. Do we have any final words from our amazing conversationalists? Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention on the topic of the buddy system, which I do think is so important. It's not just reaching though to the side for who can be a great accomplice. And I think it's also reaching back, and I think many of us know that, but so much of what I've seen in higher education, especially when it comes to student advocacy, there are time limits where people think they can wait you out, and then the next group graduates, and it's very similar with elected officials' terms and the limitations of how much you can get done. So I think what I want to see is almost cohorts of people who might be primed to take on these leadership roles, who are knowing that I'm not just entering it on my own, because that can be really intimidating, particularly when you're thinking about, canvassing and collecting signatures. But if we can cultivate communities, small communities of people who are ready to step in and pass that baton, I think that that's really going to be what helps us make that long-term change that takes sometimes longer than our time in a position.
I'll just say thank you, in closing. I love when you get to the end of the conversation and things start flowing. Sheena reminds me of like one of my favorite poets, Nayira Wahid. She says, you don't have to be a fire to burn down every mountain blocking you. You could be a river in soft water, your way to freedom too. And it's just like the beautiful way that you have these different ways of doing things and of attacking things. And it is the thing that I think throughout this entire conference has been so beautiful, is how dynamic and diverse our community is. And I think that if you run for office, or you show up and yell at those who have been elected to office, or you are in the background quietly emailing policy to your elected officials, there's a place for everyone in that. Ecology has kind of been the theme since the beginning of the conference, and the way that we each fit into that ecology. And I'm so excited to have another conversation like this in future, to work with Equality Ohio and other equality-based organizations that are willing to work for the betterment of all of Ohio's LGBTQIA community. And thanks again for having me here tonight.
Well, Justin, you did an awesome job at that. So I'm going to add, if you are thinking about running, please run. Don't think, just do, because we need you.
I told Gwen, I was hearing Micah say we needed a relay team. We got to have somebody to pass the baton to, right? You got to be 4 deep. We need to be 4 deep in every city, in every village, at the State House. Let's get it. Let's get 4 deep here around Ohio. Thank you so much. Micah McCarey, Sheena Barnes, Justin Gould, all of you here who have been with us throughout the conference. It has been absolutely spectacular. We created this space for community. Community showed up and showed out in ways that we could not even expect. And we are so, so grateful to be doing this work with you. Please stay connected to us. As you saw yesterday, anything can happen in a moment. And the best way to stay up on that is to be connected to us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then eventually on YouTube. We are going to have each of these sessions that were taped on our YouTube channel. So please watch our YouTube channel. We've been releasing a new video every day of June for Pride Month. So there's lots to check out on that YouTube channel about our legal clinic, the work that we do, all kinds of great information there. So with that, I am going to release you to your final Pride weekend. Oh my gosh, try not to tear up those streets too much, people. It is the final weekend of Pride. And I hope that everyone has had a beautiful month, that you have been encouraged and felt the love of this space, and that you will join us again the next time that we have an event, the next time we have a stakeholder summit, the next time that we are in your part of Ohio. Thank you so much for being here, and happy Pride, Ohio. Let's keep moving fiercely forward. Bye-bye.